Hi and welcome to Home Assistant How-To with Bearded Thinker. Today we are going to play with the Shelly Door and Window Sensor 2 and integrated it inside Home Assistant. We'll start in 10 seconds. Before we proceed with today's topic, let me first thank all the members who have joined my YouTube channel. Thank you very much for all of your support. And also thanks to everybody who watched, subscribed or liked my videos. Thank you. And now let's get back to Shelly video. If you are in need of a sensor or a plug, you can always go for the Zigbee or Z-Wave. But Shelly is the one that is providing you with a wide range of sensors and devices that work over Wi-Fi. One of the sensors I bought a couple of months ago was Shelly Door and Window 2 sensor. Yeah, I'm not that impressed. In terms of technology inside, it's really great sensor. But in my opinion, it has a couple of issues. First of all, it's the size. If you compare it with other devices, such as this Shelly button, Xiaomi motion sensor, Shelly Uno, you see that the size is really huge. One of the reasons the size is this big is the batteries. And yes, this device needs two batteries. And when you open up the case, you will see that those two batteries are really the reason why this sensor is so big. But still, I wasn't impressed. Yes, this device needs power and it works over Wi-Fi, so it needs a lot of power. But the quality of the finished product that I received was just simply not something that I would expect from Shelly. Why? Unfortunately, I had to bend battery contacts because even when I inserted the batteries, there was probably 2 or 3 millimeter gap in order for batteries to make contact with the leads. I wasn't really expecting such a, I would say, low quality control or whatever from Shelly, but yes, that's the truth. I don't know if the quality of other devices is better or not, but I was not expecting this from this device. One additional thing I have to mention, I have this sensor for around 5 months, and this is the second set of batteries. Yes, somehow, even when the sensor was not installed on the door or window, it did manage to drain it up completely in around 60 days. I did make sure that there was a contact between the magnet and the sensor, and I'm sure that there was not so much shaking going on for the vibration sensor to be triggered or light changes, but still. And those batteries are not cheap and you cannot get them in all the shops, so you have to go and search for them. But let's talk about additional functionality that this sensor has that most of other door or window sensors do not have. First of all, it has tilt functionality. I wasn't unfortunately very satisfied with how tilt functionality works. You do have to calibrate it after you install the sensor, but the sensitivity for me just didn't work. But there is, and it does show a tilt position. Second thing that this sensor has that other sensors do not have is lux, or luminosity sensor. I'm not sure of what will be the case for this. For example, one may be that if illumination changes, you trigger either lights on or lights off, but I'm not that sure that it works that way. Second thing that this sensor has that most of the other sensors do not have is vibration sensor. It will register vibrations. You have option to configure it to more or less sensitivity. I left it at the 50% setting, and while I was testing it, I really did need to shake it up like a can of paint to make it register, but it did register. One additional thing that this sensor has that none of the other door window sensors have, at least the ones I've tested or seen, is the temperature sensor. The precision of the temperature or default value that sensor gives, yeah, it was just a bit too high if I compare it with the other temperature sensors I had in the vicinity, but the great thing about it is that you can tweak it out. There is a way to calibrate the temperature sensor. In terms of lightning fast responses, you do have to remember that this is a Wi-Fi device. If it is in a sleep mode, when it wakes up, it needs to connect to the network and send the package, which is not as fast as, for example, for the Zigbee or Z-Wave devices. So there is a bit of delay, but I would say that that delay wasn't that bad when I was testing it. So you do get response in 1 or maybe 2 seconds if the device is in the sleep mode, which is still great. So let's talk about the setup process. You need to insert the batteries, and as soon as you insert the batteries, but please check if there is a contact between the battery and the power leads, because mine didn't have contact, so I had to bend the leg a bit to get the contact. But when you insert the battery, the device should wake up in access point mode, meaning that you have to connect through the Wi-Fi to it and use the address 192.168.33.1 to connect to the web page. First thing, and something that I will not be covering once again in this video, is for you to set up the Wi-Fi network. That way, this device will connect to your existing Wi-Fi network and we can proceed from there. As you can see, the user interface is same as for all the Shelly devices. It does have specific information here, which other sensors do not have, and this is the state of the door, tilt of the door or window, is the vibration detected or not, the lux or luminosity, state of the battery, and current temperature. So let's quickly go through the configuration. First things first, if you have configured access point, I would suggest that you start with the internet and security. Wi-Fi mode, you use this to connect to your existing Wi-Fi network. I would suggest that you also set up the Wi-Fi client backup if you have a backup network. I do, and I've set that one up. Wi-Fi reconnect, this is a manual way to reconnect to the strongest access point. You can use it if you move the sensor to make sure that it connects to the strongest access point in range. Access point, we do not need it, this is only needed before you configure it for your Wi-Fi network. Restrict login, I do not use it on my network, but you can use it to set up username and password for this device. SMTP server is used to provide time to the sensor, and I don't know why, because this one simply doesn't work with it. It does work, but the problem is that the sensor is most of the time in sleep mode. So it needs to reconnect to get the time and date. Now let's look at two settings we need to set up for Home Assistant. Enable CO IoT. If you want to use it in a peer mode, which is something that is suggested in a Home Assistant Shelly integration documentation, you have to specify the IP address of your Home Assistant with the port 5683. This is default port for CO IoT, and this is also preferred method of integration. Before we proceed further, there are three ways you can integrate most or all of Shelly devices. First is to use internal Home Assistant integration. This is something that's been developed and maintained by the Home Assistant developers. Second, and the method I prefer lately, is to use MQTT. Why? MQTT makes sure that all of the data for my sensors is available even after or during the restart of my Home Assistant. So for example, if the door would be open in the period when the Home Assistant was restarted, this message is waiting in the MQTT server and will be pulled by Home Assistant as soon as it starts up. And the third option is to use custom component called ShellyforHASS, which is a great, and this component at one point was much better than the one currently included in Home Assistant, but since the Home Assistant integration has been developed a lot lately, I think that they match. And if I would need to choose between the Home Assistant internal integration and ShellyforHASS, in my personal opinion, that can be of course wrong, is I would go with the Home Assistant internal integration. So as I said, you only need the IP address and the port number here, press save, and this is all that's needed for the Home Assistant integration in terms of the Shelly configuration. But I'm using MQTT. And yes, you can have parallel CO IoT and MQTT, as you can see here. For the MQTT integration, you have to enable it. If you are using username and password, you need to insert both username and password and the server IP address with the port. This can be either default 1883 or any other port if you set it up like that on your MQTT server. The other things that are here, I'm not touching. Let's press save, and MQTT settings have been saved. Cloud, this is something I don't use, but I have been testing with this device, and for now I will disable the cloud. This is all we need to set up for it to work in Home Assistant. But let's look at some other settings. First of all, let's look at settings. LED light control. I have disabled LED light control because I want to preserve power. Firmware update. At the time of recording, this should be the latest version of the firmware, and the version is 1.10.2. Factory reset is just what the name says, reset of the device to factory settings. Device reboot allows you to reboot device. Other settings are device discoverable, I always make it available or discoverable, and device information, which gives you information about the device ID, what SSID it is currently connected and the signal strength, and of course allows you to enable debug log. Sensor URL actions is a really great thing and I should use that in future. Currently I'm not using it on any of my Shell devices for anything. So for example, if you set up over temperature or under temperature URL, and you can set the value here, this is the URL that will be called. You can use it as a webhook. But as I said, I'm currently not using it and not planning to use. Actions is also something that I'm not using because I'm handling that on Home Assistant side. Or I would say I would handle that on Home Assistant side. What it allows you a bit more complex actions that happen based on the sensor information. So for example, report sensor values, enabled, and then you would be using this URL that would be called when the sensor value changes. And what are those other activities that sensor can trigger? So open when dark, open when twilight, open when daylight. Dark, twilight and daylight can be set up later on in sensor settings and I will show you in a minute. Closed will be called when the door or window is closed, and vibration will be called if the sensor detects vibration. In sensor settings you can define illumination definitions, and we did mention it here: open when dark, open when twilight, open when daylight. So you can play with the values here. Wake up by lightning is a bit misleading. This is not a lightning sensor. It should be wake up by light change. You can enable this setting to enable device wake up while light changes. And please think of when you set or enable this functionality, because if there are a lot of light changes, there will be a lot of wake ups and the battery will drain faster. So be careful with this setting. Tilt function, which is great, but let me try and show you how it works. Let's first press calibrate. The sensor is currently on my desk. Please fully close the window. I do have contact between the magnet and the sensor and I will be pressing next. Now tilt the window. I'm tilting it and I'm pressing next. It's calibrated. So first of all, let me show you how it works. If I would now tilt the window, tilt, it's tilted, it's not registering, I'm tilting it more, the sensor is completely away and it only now registered that it's open. Tilt is not moving. Let me try to tilt this time not the magnet but the sensor itself. I've tilted it, it's around 45 degrees. Most of the magnet is no more touching the sensor and the sensor still says closed and no data. Closed, no data. Closed, no data. Open. Yeah, by the way, did you see? No vibration. No vibration. No vibration. No vibration. No vibration. No vibration. And it's closed. Yeah, okay, let's forget about it for a second and continue with the settings. Vibration detection, as I said, I've set it up to medium. Let's move it to the maximum sensitivity. I've taken the sensor in my hand. Maximum sensitivity, still closed, zero tilt. Yeah. So I really am not sure if this is some kind of defect of my sensor, but as I said, I'm not that impressed. One other settings we have is reverse open close logic, which is great because it can be used that, for example, sometimes you have to reverse the logic. When the door is open to register it as a closed, and when the door is closed to register is open. I'm not sure really when or for what it would be used, but it's great to have that option. Temperature units is just a switch to switch between Celsius and Fahrenheit. Temperature threshold is the threshold that sensor needs to detect change in temperature to wake up and report the value. And by the way, this is something that I didn't see at a lot of other sensors that are currently available in the market, which is really great functionality, and I think that more sensors should have it. And the last thing is temperature offset, because 31.3, oh, vibration is not detected, because 31.3, no, currently here it's around 25-26 degrees. So having the ability to set a temperature offset, let me try with -5, should make this much more useful. By the way, we do have vibration now detected, and no, it's not vibrating anymore. So this is why I said that I'm not impressed with this sensor. It has a lot of sensors, it has great potential, but maybe my sensor has a defect or is not working as it should work. But yeah, I'm just out of luck with it. And this is more or less everything you can set up or do inside the user interface of Shelly Door and Windows Sensor 2. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but the battery has fallen from 99% to 95% just during the recording of this video. 1 year battery life. Yeah, the user interface and the setup process is really consuming much more power than this sensor would be using during the normal operation, but still. Let's go to Home Assistant and see there what we need to do to integrate it inside Home Assistant. If you are using Home Assistant, as I said, you have two options on how to integrate it. If you are using MQTT, when you go to Configuration, Integration, select here MQTT devices, type Door, you will see automatically Door Windows Sensor added. And in terms of entities, these are the entities that you have. One is the battery percentage, the other one is the state of the firmware, then we have the IP address, luminosity or look sensor, status of the door or window, temperature, and if you notice here, it is using the threshold value, so it's now showing 5 degrees less than what it is measuring. The tilt status and the vibration sensor. Let's add this to Lovelace. If you want to use Home Assistant internal integration for this should also be easy. And by the time you reach Home Assistant, you should see notification here about the new devices. I do not have it, it was automatically added here, so I have it in the list of Shelly devices. And here it is. The only sensor currently this sensor provides to Home Assistant is unfortunately the status of the door sensor. So no temperature, no lux, no vibration, no tilt, no anything. Let's add it. Fun stuff. Add to Lovelace UI. And in the user interface, this looks like this. This is the MQTT data, and this one is from the internal Home Assistant integration. Both say that they are closed. Let's now test the speed of the sensor. We have here internal Home Assistant integration, and here we have MQTT integration. This is the sensor, and let me open it. Unfortunately, the Home Assistant internal integration is not registering it. And the MQTT takes around 3 to 5 seconds to register the change. I wouldn't call this very fast, but on the other hand, this is a Wi-Fi device, and as I said, if it's in the sleep mode, it takes a little bit for it to wake up, connect to the Wi-Fi network, connect to the server, and send the data. What are your options in terms of Home Assistant automation? Well, we can play with the vibration sensor, which I wouldn't call that sensitive, and we can play with the door open sensor. Let's go to configuration, automations, add automation, start with empty automation and create Shelly Door sensor. Would be state of the Shelly Door window sensor. When it changes to on, so if it changes to on, this means that the door is open for, let's say, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, meaning 1 minute. Then we want to create action, call service, text to speech, clock me, front door is open. Now, with this automation, anytime the front door is open for more than 1 minute, and for the testing purposes, let me shorten this out for 1 second. Text-to-speech will be called, and on this media player, which is my small Lenovo clock, it would say the message front door is open. So let's test it.
Front door is open.
Okay, here it is. The next one, as I said, you can play with the vibration sensor. Let's exit here. Let's add new. Start with empty. Shelly Door vibration. Once again, we'll be using state. Entity will be door window, but this time we'll be using vibration sensor to on. We will call a service. Text to speech. Entity will be clock. And the message will be front door is vibrating for whatever reason. Let's press save. And now let's test the sensor. Let's shake it slowly, slowly, more and more.
Front door is vibrating.
Finally, front door is vibrating. Okay, and this is it. There are other things that you can also configure. Here is the voice or some other activity that is triggered depending on the lux level, or for example, temperature level, etc. But as I said, I am really liking what the Shelly tried to do with the sensor, and I think that all this functionality inside of it is really great. I'm just not sure if this is the problem with my sensor, or if this is the general problem with the Shelly Door Window 2 sensor. And this is it for this Home Assistant how-to with Bearded Thinker. I really do hope that you did enjoy this video because it's a little bit different than my usual videos. If you did like it, please give me a thumbs up. If you still haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you get notified on the future updates, and I'll be seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye and have fun.